what they call a honeycomb radiator. And the tube is just a straight brass tube, but it's been swedged on both ends to make it hex on just the ends. And so then you pile them all together and you solder the front and you solder the back. And so now you've got a radiator. I started this business, or started working with Bugattis, I believe in 1974, when I was working for Sports and Vintage Motors in Boulder, a man there by the name of Bob Seifert. And he decided he wanted a Bugatti, and so he bought the pieces to a Bugatti. And I went to California, moved to California, and we felt, well, if I lived out there for about 3 or 4 months and worked with a man called Bunny Phillips, O.A. Phillips, that would be enough to get me really started, and I would learn pretty much all I needed to know about Bugattis. Well, 40-some years later, I guess you could say I'm still learning. Slow learner. My name is Jim Stranberg. I've been working on Bugattis for the last 40 years. I've also been a judge at Pebble Beach for the last 30 years. I should get my 30-year pin and my gold watch this year, I'm hoping. Not so much for the gold watch, but the pin. The first car I did is still being shown since I think we finished it in 1990, and it was quite an experience, having done the first car that I actually took completely apart, every nut and bolt on the car, replaced what needed to be replaced, refurbished whatever you could fix, so that we kept the car as original as possible. And the body shop that I was working with at the time said, well, to fix some of this wood, because all of these cars in this era are built around a wooden frame. And so the guy said, what we'll have to do is remove the metal from the wooden frame, which I was unaware of and didn't realize that you could actually do that and then actually put it back together again. So I was a bit reluctant to start that process to begin with. But once we did it, I found that, yeah, that is the easiest way to get to the wood. You're able to really restore the wood at that point, replace anything that is rotten, and build a really strong, healthy car again. And then they were able to put the metal back on the frame, and everything seemed to work out really well. People have many times have looked at the cars that we did, came out of the shop, and said, oh, you're an incredible artist. And I said, no, I'm not an artist. I like to be known as a craftsman, and there's a difference. The artist creates, the craftsman recreates. And if you don't know Bugatti, it's worth looking up. It's worth trying to find out who this man was. He comes from a very artistic family. Everybody in his family was an artist of some sort or another. And he was interested in motor cars at that time. I mean, that was right at the turn of the century being 1800s to the 1900s. He developed his cars with a real artistic flair, and that's one of the things that makes Bugatti stand out from other cars. He was the one that created the car, he's the one that designed the cars as an individual. But Bugatti at the beginning was an artist. He had a good mechanical knowledge, but more than that, he was an artist. And that's why his cars look the way they do, why the engines look the way they do. Because if it didn't look right, it wasn't right. But always remember, Bugatti was an artist first, mechanical engineer or developer of cars secondly, I guess. That's the way I always put it anyway. In my whole career, I had the express joy of rebuilding and restoring the Atlantic Bugatti, belonging to Peter Williamson. That was the most difficult and the most rewarding car that we did. If you've ever looked at it carefully, you can see that there's two sides to the car, and it's held together with rivets. So it means taking out, I don't remember the exact number, but hundreds of rivets to get it apart. And again, that was another one of those cars where we took completely apart and put it back together, going over every nut and bolt on the car. So when it's restored, it is restored. You can't say, well, we just did a few mechanical things to it. And with that car, we were able to win Best of Show. So that was the icing on the cake. People always ask, well, how much is that car worth? And I usually say, well, it's probably worth more in your house. But that isn't what's important here. What's important is the car itself and the restoration of it, bringing it back to life again, making it look probably better than it did when it came out of the factory, but giving it a whole new life. And it's my theory that cars have a half-life. And when you reach the point where they're pretty much ready to fall apart, and is valuable enough, it's time to take them apart and restore it. And restoration to me is taking the whole car apart and restoring everything that is a problem in the car. And these days, that gets to be very, very expensive. It can run anywhere from, say, $500,000 to $1 million, depending on who's doing it. And I figure that you're giving this car a new life. You're starting it all over again. And these cars are important enough that they should have that done to them. They shouldn't just be thrown away into a junkyard or left sitting out in your backyard deteriorating. They should be brought back to life. And there's a tremendous amount of satisfaction in doing the job, plus a tremendous amount of satisfaction having it done and then being able to use it for whatever you want to use it for. Some people like to just have it in the garage and look at it because it's a beautiful piece of work. Others like to show it at Concord Elegance. Others like to just go out and drive it. We have our own little car, which is a Type 40A Bugatti. Just a little background on the car. I was working and a gentleman called me and asked me, he says, I've just found a car on eBay and it's all in pieces, and I was wondering if you could give me an idea about how much it would cost to put it all together and restore it. And I said, well, at that time it'd be around $250,000 to put all the pieces together. Then he said, well, how much do you think it'd be worth? This was back in the 90s. I figured the car would be worth somewhere around 175, maybe 200,000 on a good day. So he said, well, that doesn't seem to make an awful lot of sense to spend this kind of money putting a car together and then having only worth about what you put into it. So I said, well, that's pretty much my estimate on the thing. And so he said, well, I'm not going to do that then. So I said, well, if you're not interested, would you mind if I went after the car? He said, no, go for it. I said, I figured I could put it together on my own time. So I did get it. We went into debt. I got a loan, bought all the pieces. I flew out to North Carolina where the car was and looked over the pieces. Pretty much everything seemed to be there. So I rented a U-Haul, put all the pieces in and drove back to Colorado. For many years, I'm afraid it just sort of sat there as pieces because I never found time to put it together. And then I think the year before 2010, 2009, there was going to be a major rally in California. It was going to be an international rally. So we decided that we had to be on that with our car. So what we did was I hired a couple of the guys that was working for me and a couple other friends who really knew what they were doing, and we all got together and put the car together, and at the end of the day we showed it at Pebble Beach, and right after Pebble Beach we got in the car and started driving and drove it on the rally for 1,000 miles. It's been an incredible journey that I've been on. Certainly have taken us, my wife and I, around the world. We've enjoyed many, many rallies, and I've really enjoyed the work. It was always exciting to get a new car in and start taking it apart, because you never knew what you would find underneath the upholstery or the body and stuff like that. What it does for you, it opens up a whole nother world. And it's been fantastic as far as I've been concerned. The benefits from being in this business is not only the people that you meet and the places you go, it's the joy of driving an old car. The joy that that brings to other people besides yourself. Would recommend it highly for anybody who cares about restoring and bringing back to life these wonderful machines. Do I have a favorite car? Bugatti.